In this video, we'll be looking at the problem of rendering convincing skin tones in pen and watercolor. We'll start by analyzing some old master portraits to see if we can derive some principles that can be applied to our work, and then I'll do a pen and watercolor portrait demonstration, this one, to show you how these principles are applied. Let's get started. Whether you like his work or not, Peter Paul Rubens created some of the most vibrant, realistic skin tones of all time, especially in his small-scale works that were done entirely by him instead of by an army of studio assistants who worked on his larger commissions. In this absolutely sparkling portrait of a young girl, possibly his daughter, Clara Serena, Rubens gives us a lot of principles on how to achieve skin tones that are not only realistic, but vibrant and compelling. The first principle is color complexity. Instead of mixing up large amounts of uniform color and painting everything with it, Rubens mixes the greatest variety of color possible without going overboard and making the skin tone look splotchy or oversaturated. That degree of color complexity extends not just to the lights, but also to the shadows, which are rendered with an equal variety of color as the lights. This is an important point that needs to be emphasized. Treat the color in the shadows with the same attention as the color in the lighter parts. This principle of color complexity is key to getting skin tones to look alive. The color of skin is very complex, with local color constantly changing, becoming more yellow, pink, red, purple, and even green sometimes. Combine that color complexity with the influence of light and surrounding color, and there's potential for a dazzling variety, even in a small patch of skin. This principle of color complexity is key to getting skin to look alive. The color of skin is very complex, with the local color constantly changing, becoming more yellow, pink, red, purple, even green sometimes. Combine that local color complexity with the influence of the light source and surrounding colors, and there's potential for a dazzling variety, even in a small patch of skin. With Rubens, the color variety is perhaps pushed to its limits, and any more and the color would feel motley and oversaturated. Here is another famous portrait by Rubens, possibly of his sister-in-law, Susanna London, popularly known as the Straw Hat. The skin tones here are cooler, and the shadows, imbued with an ambient blue of the sky, are much lighter. But the principle of color complexity is just as evident, with subtle color shifts from purple to yellow to pink absolutely everywhere. By the way, notice how he drags the blue of the sky next to the earring into the jawline, an incredibly expressive and atmospheric touch, anticipating the developments of the Impressionists some 200 years later. Rubens is all about effusive, overflowing vitality, which to our more restrained sensibility may feel overwrought and garish. But the principle of color complexity can be applied in a much more subtle, restrained way. Here is a brilliant portrait of Cornelis van der Geest by Anthony van Dyck, who was a pupil of Rubens. The color shifts are much more restrained, but the mixing of color is nevertheless incredibly complex. But in this portrait, we're going to derive a different principle, the use of vibrant color accents. Skin, while being very varied, is generally fairly dull-colored, but also provides a lot of opportunities to introduce stronger, more saturated color which can be exaggerated to give your work more energy. Skin is translucent, and anyone who has held their hand up to a strong light knows that skin glows red when light passes through it. By looking for those touches of red and even emphasizing them, you can add extra color variety to your skin tone. That's something Van Dyck does at the bottom shadow of the upper eyelid and the wrinkles just above it. Warm, vibrant color accents can also lurk in shadow areas because warm light is reflected into them. This we see in the shadows inside the eye socket and surrounding the nostril. And lastly, Van Dyck makes expert use of other opportunities to add bright color by emphasizing the strong reds inside the eye and the lips of the sitter. Many things are done well in this portrait, including the incredibly accurate drawing and control of value. But the skin tone, which manages to be both restrained and energetic, plays a large part in making this masterpiece so compelling. Let's talk about the third principle. Here is a portrait by Velázquez of Philip IV, where we observe a very important element that not only underpins the strong sense of volume, but also the sense of realistic skin tone, the use of gray. Skin, no matter how pink and ruddy, has a lot of gray in it, especially in areas where it's thinnest, around the eye sockets and the temples. There's also a lot of gray in the halftone, those areas where the skin transitions from light into shadow. Gray in those areas helps turn the form and is key to creating a three-dimensional effect. Not including gray in skin tone is one of the biggest mistakes that beginners make. One of the best training methods for creating convincing skin tone is to copy, and I promise you that you'll see tremendous growth in your ability to depict skin if you copy the portrait examples I just showed you. But in this video, I'm going to see if I can apply those 3 principles of skin tone to do an original work of my own in pen and watercolor. Before beginning the demonstration, let's go over what materials I'm going to use. I'm working in a Hochnemüller Academy watercolor sketchbook, which is filled with a medium tooth paper. So it's not cold press, which is rough grain. It's not hot press, which is perfectly smooth. It's somewhere in between, making it ideal for using a combination of watercolor and pen and ink. For the pen, I'm using an Opus 88 Lenin toolbar, which is unfortunately discontinued, but the Opus 88 Coloro is identical, just made of different materials. It's fitted with a nib that unfortunately you're going to have a really hard time getting. This is a vintage 14K flex nib from an old Parker Lucky Curve. This is an absolutely exquisite nib, but the regular nib that comes in these Opus 88s is perfectly fine. It's a number 5 Jowo steel nib. For my ink, I'm going to be using a brown ink. This is De Atramentis Document ink, which is fully waterproof. Why do I use a brown? Because it pairs better with skin tone. So you can of course use black if you want a really sharp graphic effect, if you're a graphic novelist, if you want your work to reproduce well. But for fine arts, if you want a softer, more naturalistic effect, brown ink is better. It works better in the shadows, it doesn't interfere with the colors you lay on top quite as much, and actually blends really well with the colors. There are other options, however. So besides a brown, you can also use a dark red. So we're going to see in a lot of old master paintings that in the very darkest shadows on the skin tone, you have this vibrant dark red color, and this color actually mimics it quite well. Some other options that I really like. This is a Roher and Klingner sketch ink. It is the Jule color, which is very similar to the dark red. It's a little bit more purple, and again, pairs really well for those very dark shadows, which need a little bit of vibrancy in them. They can't be pure black. Another ink that I really like that's a little more neutral, a little more sepia colored is this Roher and Klingner Lily ink, which is kind of in between gray and brown. Again, it blends really well with the colors, pairs well with the colors you place on top.